Everybody, welcome back to the High Performance Zone. Today, we have the head coach of happiness. Her name is Dr. E. Elizabeth Lombardo. She's a Ph.D. clinical psychologist. But let me tell you, Shaq gave her the title of the head coach of happiness. She has helped not only celebrities and sports stars, but organizations get out of the red zone. And what do we mean by the red zone? This is when you're totally stressed out. She labels it as in the 7 to 10 range of stress. And guess what? You don't think well when you're in those zones. And there's a way to get out of it. Here's what's cool is we talk about how psychology, science, and the glad to be here or gratitude all combines into living longer. Listen to this podcast. If you adopt it, you will live 8 to 10 years longer. That's what the science says. Okay, let's dive in with Dr. E and Gucci. Ready? Hit it. Hey, everybody. I got in the house Dr. E, Elizabeth Lombardo. Elizabeth, I got to tell you, I'm so excited right now because your main message, as I know it, is mindset. And you and I both love mindset. And I just want to say thank you. I'm so excited to have the audience hear about how you are developing a positive mindset and helping others. So welcome to the show and glad to be here.
Well, I am glad to be here too. So thank you very much. Cheers to you.
Cheers to you. I love that. For those of you who aren't watching, we just had 2 glad to be here mugs toasting. And that's awesome. Hey, Elizabeth, and by the way, you already have a call sign. It's Dr. E. It's part of your brand. Not everybody I get to talk to already has a call sign. We'll see if you get a new one in the process here. But first off, you know, I was doing some research, actually my team was, and there's so much goodness that you're doing out there. But I wanted to start with, how do you become a head coach for happiness? What is that all about?
Well, let's see. How far back do we want to go, right? I was born at a young age. No. So my path is interesting. I'm a clinical psychologist now. I used to be a physical therapist.
Okay.
And I was a practicing PT. I worked at a veterans administration, and I loved being a physical therapist. I loved having my clients come in, after a stroke or in serious pain, and to be able to help them function better and to get out of pain. And I thought, this is it. Like, I was content. This is my life. Things are good. And I had a client who was had a surgical amputation because of diabetic complications. Unfortunately, not uncommon. He had diabetes, had an ulcer, didn't heal. They had to cut part of his leg off. He came down to the physical therapy gym. And as you will all see within the next couple of minutes, I tend to be high energy. And this was when I was younger. So I was really high energy. And I was, cheerleading, like, woo, I'm so excited. We're going to teach you how to walk again. And he wanted nothing to do with me. So he yelled at me and said, just leave me alone and send me back to my room. So we sent him back to his room. And later we were doing rounds, doctors, nurses, therapists, all talking about, each patient and how we can all serve them best. And everyone agreed that this gentleman called David was struggling. The attending physician, and this is what changed my life forever, the attending physician said, I'll prescribe him Prozac.
Yeah.
Now, there is a time and place for medication. Absolutely. But I was struck by the fact that no one was helping him process the fact that his leg was gone, right? And that, part of his body was gone, and this just processed this loss in the morning. And it really was, it was like the heavens opened up and said, Elizabeth, this is your calling. So I went back to school and got a degree in psychology. And then, this is probably a longer story than you need, but then I had a private practice in Dallas. Had a couple kids while I was there. It was great. And then my husband got a job in Pennsylvania. So this was way before the internet. This was way before telehealth. And so I had to close my practices down. Now, a lot of times people come to see a shrink because of fear of abandonment issues. And I felt like I was abandoning my clients. And so I didn't want to ever do that again. So I said, I'm not ever opening another private practice. I'm going to write a book. And I decided to write a book on happiness. Because I think we all can be happier. And if you look at the research on happiness, happiness isn't just like, oh, she's smiling and, having a good time. there's a lot of great stuff that comes with happiness, right? It positively impacts our physical health, our relationships, our work. Happier people are 31% more productive and have a 38% increase in sales. So there's a lot of good stuff that comes with happiness. And so, yeah, so that was my first book. It was called A Happy You, Your Ultimate Prescription for Happiness. And it really was my goal that regardless of what's going on in life, that we can bring happiness into our lives. And the cool thing about happiness is we call it 2 degrees of separation. So when you're happier, the people around you are happier and the people around them are happier.
Yes. And I would suggest that it doesn't stop with 2 degrees, right? It just continues.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what the research shows. But yes, I would agree.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I'm glad we're talking science here because there's a lot of difference between what we think and then what we can actually verify, right? So this is super cool. Okay, done, because here's what we're talking about. To me, you just articulated why I'm wearing this shirt, glad to be here, and why we're toasting to these mugs that says glad to be here, which I believe it has to do with happiness, but it's much deeper, right? Of what you're talking about. So we're going to have some fun today because let's unpack it, right? Let's unpack what happiness really means. How do you get it? What are some of the techniques you use, and most of all, how can we benefit others, right? Because I haven't read your book. I wish I had. I will. You got to send me. No, I'm going to buy one. You don't have to send me anything. I'm going to buy one.
I can send it to you. I have it on audio too.
Oh, good. That's even better. I'm an
books?
audio guy. And I just launched my book, Fearless Success, on audio. So I can't wait to see how that's going for you. But let's just be raw. Let's define what is happiness and what is not happiness from your thoughts.
So happiness is not laughing and being giddy all the time.
Okay.
That's called being stoned. And we are not advocating that here on this podcast. I think a lot of people think that's what happiness is, right? It's pleasure. It's eating chocolate chip cookies all day. That's not what happiness is. True happiness really is about meaning. It's about, I have something I call the true success formula, which if you're going to ask me how to define happiness, that's what I would say it is.
Great.
It's passion, it's purpose, and it's people. So passion is positive energy, even during challenging times, right? Being glad to be here. That is passion. Purpose is having meaning and fulfillment in our lives. And that is a key component when it comes to true happiness. And then people, we're social beings, like it or not, we're social beings. And so optimizing our relationships, whether it's people at work, people in our personal lives, whatever, those 3 components, when they are at high levels, that's when we have true happiness.
Whoa, I love it. We haven't read each other's books yet, but the idea of, I call them the 4 Ps, and you nailed 3 of them, right? I like better that it's 3 because that's what the mind kind of holds on to easier, right? But when you talk about passion and then purpose and people, the way I've been kind of learning over time is, this idea of purpose. I find you need a purpose larger than self to truly get to what we're talking about, happiness. Yeah, I could have a purpose to make money. I could have a purpose to, earn a degree, whatever. Those are good. I mean, whatever. But when that purpose is higher than self, that's when I feel the energy. That's what gets me up in the mornings. Tell me from the science or from your thoughts, how does that fit in?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Having a purpose greater than ourselves is exactly that kind of purpose. And, sometimes when people say, oh, I want to make money, I want to have a good job, then the question that I would pose as a coach and therapist is why? So we call it the 7 stages of why. Are you familiar with that exercise?
Oh, well, I've heard it, but run them through me real quick. Cause
So when someone says I want blah, blah, blah. Okay. Why?
Yep. Yeah.
I want to make $1 million. Okay. Why? Well, because then I can, I don't know, go on vacation. Okay. And why is that important to you? Well, I want to travel the world. Okay. Why is that important to you? Because I want my, and you level up and you level up. And eventually most people are, because I want to serve others. I want to make this world a better place. I want to cultivate closer relationships with my family. Like when people level up to something bigger than themselves, that's when they get really excited. And the beauty is when we have a strong passion, the little stuff doesn't matter as much, right? I mean, if your purpose in life is to solve world hunger, then being stuck in a traffic jam for 20 minutes, it's not that big of a deal, right? Nice. If someone cuts you off, it's not that big of a deal because your purpose is to solve world hunger. So it really helps us get our mindset into a place that's more healthy and helpful.
Wow. Okay. So we're going to have so much fun because there's so many questions just went off. One that I have is what do you do for people who maybe don't know their purpose right now?
You ask them the 7 degrees of why.
Oh, okay. Well, I like this. So
You take them through that.
well, let's take me through it because I think I have my purpose, but let's see. Okay.
Okay.
So if I were to say, Dr. E, I don't really know what my long-term purpose is in life. Go.
Okay. So what do you think it is? What's something that gets you excited?
Yeah, well, we
what do
already
you wanna
mentioned
do?
it, but I actually want to save the world. Okay, now that might sound really kind of egotistical because why does the world need to be saved? But I want to inspire 1 billion people to live a life that is full. Now, I've thought about that. So when I say I don't have a purpose, I actually do.
It sounds pretty clear cut. So
Yeah.
why is that important to you?
Because I found that just being successful in my own life, however you want to define that, it could be flying jets, it could be anything, right? While that's meaningful, and I do, appreciate the opportunities to push myself, it's no longer about myself. I feel like even looking at you right here there's my mind can, and I think, in a misunderstanding way, say you're separate than I am. Okay. That's Dr. E. This is Gucci. Right. And what I've realized with more study and training is that really we're not that separate. And if I could actually treat you like me, then I'm going to treat everybody a lot better. So that's why I want to do it. And I know it's not easy. It's easy to say, but to actually want to treat somebody like yourself is really hard.
So why do you want to treat someone like yourself?
Well, I think because spiritually, I've been told that's the right thing to do, but that's not enough, right? Because I think that's great to have spiritual lessons or any kind of lessons, or like you and I are unpacking some really success secrets, right? And I think those are great, but at the end of the day, it has to become ingrained into my heart, not my head. So if I'm living in my head with, well, that's the right thing to do, and I put that in quotes, if I don't feel it, then I'm not sure I really understand it.
Okay. So why is it important for you to understand it?
Well, I want to evolve. I mean, I really do. I have a mantra of myself, which is learn, grow, give. And I realized I had the order wrong, by the way, that, it actually starts with giving. Right. And once you give, then you learn and then you grow. So I do want to grow. I do want to become a better person, but I want to become a better person that also helps a better world. It's not enough for me to say, well, I'm happy if I'm looking out there and there's other people who aren't.
Sure. So you want to grow and you want to help the world grow and be better. Why?
First, I think I said it was what I think is the right thing to do, but it has to be more than that. So the real why is, you know what? It makes me feel good. I mean, yeah, now we're getting to it. Thank you. Because I can see why this works because I hadn't thought of that. But when I said, you know what? Hell, I feel good when I do that. Then I get energy in my body. And it's like, well, shit, I'll get up early to do that. Yeah. So yeah, maybe to feel good.
Yeah. And so why is it important for you to feel good?
Well, when I feel good, not only do I enjoy it, I mean, but I think I'm a better person to be around, and so that's kind of fun too. It's fun, but it has to be meaningful. That's kind of the flip.
Why do you want to be better for the people around you?
Well, I want them to feel good. Right. And I know I can't make someone feel good. There's no way. Believe me. I know you're a clinical psychologist, and I can't wait to get into relationships. Hey, I struggle. All right. I mean, I'm trying to learn in my relationship. I'm learning from my wife every day, and it's not easy sometimes. Right. So let's be raw, and I realize 9 times out of 10, no, 100 times out of 100, if I point my finger at her or anybody, there's 3 of them pointing back at me. And I realize the world's coming from me, not at me. So, that's kind of a deep concept. So I'm the one that needs to not just change because you need to change. I need to really understand where I'm coming from. Where are those thoughts coming from?
So we're talking about being heart-centered, doing this not because you're supposed to, not because we're all interconnected and you read that in a spiritual manual, but because
Right.
this is what energizes you and this is what gets you excited. And this is what not only helps you be a happier and better individual, but it helps everyone else.
You did it.
Right?
Yeah.
And not because you should, and we can have
Right.
a whole conversation about should not all over yourself,
Yep.
but because that's who you are. And I think that's when we figure out our
Oh,
purpose,
nice.
it's really, that's who we are. Like you can feel that energetic shift as you were talking about that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, that's when you're like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is why I'm here.
Wow. Okay. So I don't want the podcast to be about me, even though it was kind of cool to go through that with you. I want to say thank you. Let's now pivot it to you. Okay. What is your purpose?
My purpose is to, someone asked me we were having a conversation once, and the question was not necessarily purpose, but what's your superpower? Because everyone has
Oh, I like that. That's cool.
and
Go
so
for it.
I think my purpose, or maybe superpower, is helping people. It's bringing out the best in others.
Nice.
And helping them feel good about themselves. I think people are we all have an inner critic. We all have an inner critic, right? That tells us why we're not good enough. Now with social media, we're constantly reminded that we're just not as good as quote everyone else. But there's so much potential for negativity that goes on in our minds. And so for me, helping people see, I think of people as being diamonds, right?
Oh,
shiny,
nice.
glistening diamonds. And a lot of people have a lot of dirt on them. So my purpose is to clean off the dirt so that each individual can shine. Because I think everyone is here on this earth at this particular time for a specific reason. And it may be to be a great parent. It may be to cure cancer. It may be, anything, be a great friend, whatever it is. But we're all here. We all have a purpose. And so I think that my purpose is to help people remove the dirt so that they can take the steps to really shine and fulfill their life's purpose.
Wow. Okay. Does that come from some spiritual awakening or thoughts? Because, by the way, I see the big diamond on your hand. That's awesome, right? I know. And but what's cool about the metaphor diamond? I don't know if you're aware of this, but in an Eastern tradition, a diamond is a metaphor for enlightenment or for heaven or, nirvana or those kinds of words. And so for you to use that word, I'm curious, have you studied that? Do you understand that metaphor?
Yeah.
Oh, you do, obviously.
I do, yeah.
Okay. So then you consciously use the word diamond.
I used it before, but then I learned that after. So yes. It's
Okay. Isn't that cool? I think that's kind of cool about, what was that?
No. I was saying, it is.
Yeah. I think that's cool about life in that sometimes, we're already using it. And then you find out later that science says that's right. Or you find out later that, maybe some great spiritual teacher or any teacher has said that. And you kind of go, oh yeah, well, I kind of already knew that. And I think that's true about all of us, right? We already know what's, I think, how to make ourselves happy, but then how come so many people struggle?
Well, I think on a deeper level, on a subconscious level, we all have that knowledge.
Okay.
I think our conscious minds, our minds get in the way. My grandmother, she was a psychiatric nurse, batty old woman, funny as anything. But anyway, she was very good at playing the piano. And she taught a course at the college level, even though she never graduated from university. She taught a course that she called How to Play the Piano Despite Years of Practice.
Nice.
How to play the piano despite years of practice. So she'd take her students and she'd look at their habits that weren't working and she'd help them get rid of those. She'd teach them the habits that were correct in playing the piano, and then they practiced. And if you get rid of what doesn't work, you learn what does work and you practice that, you literally can't help but get better. It's impossible to not get better. That's beautiful. I like to think that I help people be happy despite years of practice, because a lot of times people think happiness is making more money, looking a certain way, having a certain job title, these external accolades. And what happens a lot of times is people get on this we call it a hedonic treadmill in psychology, but it's
Oh.
a treadmill where once they achieve it, I make your first million. Okay. And you think, now I'm going to be happy, but guess what? Nothing's changed except your bank account. So then it's the next external accolade, external experience that people think that they need to achieve. And just, when you're on a treadmill, you ain't getting anywhere. And so helping people realize those really aren't the skills for happiness, and the skills for happiness are completely internal. You can, whatever's going on externally is going to be impacted internally, but it all starts with what we're saying to ourselves. It's all, if you could stick a microphone in your brain, that's what's going to determine your happiness. Are you focused on, wow, I'm glad to be here? Or are you focused on, oh, I have so many things I have to do today, or this, it's raining out, or whatever it is. So it's really about what we're saying to ourselves.
Whoa. Okay. Let's keep going further, because that hedonic happiness, it's not fulfilling, right? I mean, it's like eating something and it tastes great and it's gone. But tell me more about then, how do we get to those deeper levels of happiness? And what are they?
Yeah, I mean, that's where that, that passion and purpose and people really come in. And when we look at, not to geek out, but when we look at the research in positive psychology, for example, that's positive psychology about how to be happy. And we know certain things. Give
everybody some cool stats from science, because I don't know the science. So I seek that, because, when you said 31% do this, 38% are more productive, I was like, hey, that's cool. I got to remember that. So how does the science?
So happier people have 31% increase in productivity and 38% increase in sales. So just those two stats alone, think about it. If you are in a business, if you are doing anything that has to do in an organization where productivity and or sales is important, what would that mean to you, to your team, and to your entire organization? Especially right now, where there's so many, the Great Resignation, and so many companies and organizations are trying to do so much with such a small amount of staff. 31% increase in productivity. You don't need more people. You just can help them be more productive. And you can help them do that by being happier, by having more fulfillment and meaning and purpose in their life. And again, it's just a skill like playing the piano. Happier people live 80%, live 8 to 10 years longer. Because we know stress, which is what my newest book is on, is that the opposite of that is stress or distress. It causes problems, with our health. It increases inflammation. Our wound care healing goes down. Our nervous system isn't functioning as well. Our immune system isn't functioning as well. So there's a lot that goes into the power of this mindset. And it not only impacts the individual, but it impacts organizations as a whole. Okay. So what's the title of your new book? Do we know it yet? Oh, well, it came out in September, last September. And someone just said to me yesterday, oh, it's a year old. I'm like, it is a year old. So, here it is. It's called Get Out of the Red Zone, Transform Your Stress and Optimize True Success. So it's really, it's about how to handle stress. And I'll tell you, the reason I wrote it, I wrote it for a couple of reasons. One is it was a very hot topic before the pandemic. And I started writing before the pandemic. And then with the pandemic, we have all the stress and, so it's very timely. But the other reason why I wrote it is because I wanted to answer the question, why do good people sometimes do bad things? Mm-hmm. And as a parent, I have 2 teenage daughters. There have been some times when if someone was following around with a video camera, I wouldn't be too pleased with what was being seen. Right. I can remember, especially during quarantine, losing it a couple of times with all the stress that was going on. Yeah. And so I like to think of myself as a good person, and yet I don't always do good things. So I see this all the time with my clients. My clients, come in for various reasons. My belief is that, as I said, everyone's a diamond, but I believe that people, 99.999% of people are good in their core. They may not always act good, but they are good in their core. They want to be good people, but we don't always act that way. And so this concept of red zone is, if you think of stress or distress, which is the negative component of stress, it exists on a continuum from 0, no distress at all, to 10 out of 10, the most distressed you've ever been, right? So if someone's angry at a 10 out of 10, they might be yelling or throwing something, or the proverbial steam coming out of their ears. And the red zone happens when we're at a 7 out of 10 or higher. So
Oh,
7, 8, 9, 10, that's the psychological red zone, different from the football red zone. the
yeah.
psychological
I'm
red zone.
hey, it's football season this
I
Saturday.
know.
Tomorrow it's kicking off. We'll see when we get this thing, but up. But yeah, so I was thinking red zone, 20-yard line. But I
Yep,
like
yep, yeah. So in football, you want to get in the red zone. Here, we want to get out of the red zone.
right.
But in the red zone, we actually think differently
Oh
than
wow.
we do when we're out of the red zone. So in the what I would call the green zone, the 0, 1, 2, 3, that's where happiness is. And that's where we're using our frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is, of course, the structure in our brain that really differentiates us from other animals. It allows us to engage in executive functioning, right? Problem solving, perspective taking. When we're in the green zone, we can see the good and the not so good. This is where resilience happens. Yes, times are tough and I can handle it. This is when our partner does something and we're like, yeah, not a big deal, right? We can just kind of brush it off. Problem solving happens quite effectively in the green zone because we can see the good and the not so good. Leadership. I like to define a good leader as someone who brings out the best in others to work towards a common goal. All of that can happen in the green zone when we're using our frontal lobe. Now, as we go up on this distress scale, our focus narrows so that when we get into the 7, the 8, the 9, the 10, the red zone, we're focused not on the good and the bad, but only the bad. We call it negative filtering in psychology. Okay. And what happens on a biological basis is our limbic system, that fight or flight mechanism, basically, and this is an elementary explanation, but it basically hijacks our rational thinking. So we start to think in a more negative way. And if you think about it evolutionarily, it made sense, right? If our cave ancestors, I don't know, heard a rustling in the bush and thought, it's probably nothing, they may not live another day, right? Instead, they focused on the problem. They got rid of the animal or they got away from the animal. Then they got out of the red zone and everything was fine. Wow. What's happening now is so many people are stuck in the red zone because our sources of stress aren't short-term, like an animal being there or not. They're long-term. The pandemic, right? Relationship issues, health issues, financial stuff, whatever it is. And so a lot of people are spending a whole lot of time in the red zone and they're focusing on what's wrong. And we think differently, red zone versus green zone. So for example, when I'm working with organizations that are going through structural change, right? Red zone thinking is change sucks. I don't want to do it. And I can't believe they're making me do this. And I can't stand this company for making me do this. Green zone thinking, same event. Green zone thinking is, okay, change sometimes makes me uncomfortable. I'm going to embrace it because I know that change can also be positive. So let me figure out how I can take this change, apply it in my life and make the best of it. Yeah. Same event, but we're processing that event completely differently according to if we're in the red zone or green zone. So that, obviously the classic glass half full, half empty. But what I'm thinking you're thinking about is, is change a threat or an opportunity? The answer is yes. Depends on you, right? So let's get into, before we get into that, obviously I want to know, how do you move out of the red zone, right? And you're going to tell us, but what's in the middle? So from 1 to 3, I'm green, 7 to 10, I'm red. What's in the middle? Yellow. Okay. Yeah. Thanks the way you said that. Like, yeah, knucklehead. I got yellow. You're still seeing some, but I always tell my clients, be super aware, because how many times have you, but the audience, how many times have you just kind of lost it on someone? You didn't even realize you were stressed out. Because a lot of times we were creeping up into the red zone. We don't even realize it. Then there's one little thing. Someone cuts you off in traffic, or your partner makes a comment, and if you're in the green zone, not a big deal, but they can say the same thing when you're in the red zone and you have a very different reaction. Yes. So a lot of times we don't even realize where we are, but when we're in that yellow, something that bumps us up a couple of points can put us right into the red zone. That's when we don't always act rationally or think rationally. Got it. That helped me. Okay. So here's the thing. 2 things are hitting me. Perceptions. What's a valid perception? How do you perceive a situation? Because we just talked about same situation, you perceive 2 different ways. So I want that to be a thought. I also want to get to this self-talk in your mind, how you say and so number 1, okay, let's go to this next question first. Then we're going to get back to perceptions. Don't let me forget. But I've always wanted to know, where do thoughts come from? Whether they're positive or negative, even before I have that thought, because no one wants to have a bad thought. I don't want to be angry, but where's it come from? Well, They are nerves firing in your brain, would be the biological aspect of it. But what happens is our subconscious mind absorbs all information, particularly when we're children. So when we're children, until the age of 7, we basically exist in terms of our brain waves. We basically exist in a hypnotic, suggestible, subconscious level state. Whatever we hear, we just absorb, and our brain tries to make sense out of stuff. And particularly when we're younger, although some people would say older too, we tend to be rather egocentric, i.e. that happened because of me. This is why when parents get divorced, when kids are younger, they often think it's my fault. But so all this stuff happens and our mind tries to make sense out of it, but we don't stop and ask, is this accurate? Right. So maybe, we don't get invited to a birthday party. Oh, that means I'm no good. It means I'm unlovable. And then that thought gets stuffed into our subconscious. And then we may look for data to support it. Oh, that person walked by me. See, it's because I'm no good or I'm unlovable. So we have a lot of experiences that we try to make sense, but this is all happening on an unconscious level. We're not aware of it until it gets triggered. And that's when it can come out.
And so the trigger is key, right? So when you say the word trigger, give me an example. What's a trigger?
A mother-in-law.
Okay. Well, that's your trigger.
Yeah, no, not mine. My mother-in-law was actually she was pretty great, but I have a client right now who, holidays are starting to come up and this, client has a couple of kids and the mother-in-law is constantly providing her own guidance and opinion on how things should be. Another trigger, a boss, it could be, our triggers tend to be people or events and experiences.
Okay.
So for some people, the stat that more people are afraid of public speaking than are of dying, right? So do
you think that's true? I mean, is that true?
Yes. That's what people admit to. But I think that people don't really think about it. They more report, I'm afraid of public speaking, because they don't really think about their fear of dying. But so that could be a trigger too. But here's the thing, a trigger is only a trigger, and this is so key. A trigger is only a trigger if you let it be a trigger.
Right.
Trigger is only trigger if you let it be a trigger, because the trigger is only trigger because of, I'm going to go back to that word you said before that you want to come back to, our perception, our interpretation, what it means to us.
Nice.
And it's what we say to ourselves about the event or the person or the experience that makes it a trigger. It's not the event or the person, the experience.
Nice. So let's go to perceptions. How do I become aware of my own perceptions? Because, blind spots are out there, right? Scotomas, all this. But perception is so key. And what you said is, when I'm young, I'm in that perceptive mode, right? I'm just absorbing things. But how do I know if I'm absorbing something as a threat or an opportunity, that kind of thing? How do perceptions play into everything we're talking about?
Perceptions impact every single interaction we have in this world. What goes on up here in your head, which are thoughts, and by the way, the majority of our thoughts are perceptions, interpretations. They are subjective. They are not objective.
Okay.
What goes on in your head impacts every single interaction that you have. If my perception is people don't like me, then if someone looks at me funny, see, they don't like me. If my perception is overall people like me and someone looks at me funny, I'll think, oh, maybe they're having a bad day.
Nice.
So it's I always say to my clients, and I know they get sick of it, but I tell them they're going to get sick of it. So I warn them, if you could stick a microphone in your brain, what would you hear yourself saying to yourself? Because it is our thoughts, it's our perceptions that impact how we feel. It's our perceptions that impact our physiology, and it's our perceptions that impact our behaviors.
So then it begs a question. Are we our thoughts? Because even the way we're talking right now, you're pointing at your head, right? And you're going, okay, something's going on in here, but where's the, gets into the idea of ego and all this kind of stuff, right? Where's the real Dr. E, or who's the real Gucci versus what do I think I am? And is that separate from the real thing?
Well, now are you talking about like your higher self, your
Yeah.
soul? Is that what we're getting into?
Well, I mean, whatever words you want to use. Yeah, I'm actually thinking of it that way. Right. And I want to get your perception on this, right? Is there actually a difference between the thoughts we have and who we really are?
Yes,
Okay, good.
I think so. Yeah.
Tell
I
me.
mean, I think we all have a higher self. This is my opinion that, is kind of guiding us, but this ego, that this person who we are right here kind of has a mind of our own too. So I think that there's a lot of, it's, if you think about it, if I say stick a microphone in your brain, what do you hear yourself saying? A lot of times what we hear ourselves saying is a tug of war, right?
Yeah.
You suck. No, you can do this, right? That
Yeah.
person's horrible. No, they're just having a bad day. So we constantly, even in our thoughts, we have these, it's very rarely just one track that's going on.
So let's go this way. If I think of them as seeds, maybe, our thoughts are seeds, right? And they're going to either germinate or not at a certain time, right? So how do I plant more positive seeds or thoughts and actually do what you said earlier? Weed out, like playing the piano, do less of what's causing me my negative thoughts and do more of my superpowers. How do we help people do that? How do I do that?
Well, there are a couple of ways to do that. Let me think of where I want to start. One is to understand, here's where I'll start. So this notion of our inner critic, the negative things that we say to ourselves.
Okay.
And then sometimes we say nice things to ourselves. I believe that regardless of the outward event, that a motivation is always positive. So if my inner critic is saying, you suck, Elizabeth, you're going on stage, you're totally going to mess up, blah, 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 blah. If that's my inner critic, what the challenge is to say, okay, that's not nice, but what's the positive underlying motivation? So I like to think, and I'm going to use a military analogy. I can't believe I'm doing this in front of you, but think of like a drill sergeant versus a cheerleader, right? A drill sergeant versus a cheerleader. A drill sergeant will put a soldier down. Why? Not to be mean, but because they want the soldier to excel when, right? To excel when they're in a situation. The approach that the drill sergeant has is not very kind, but the motivation is very kind. They want the soldiers to succeed. So if we can listen to our inner critic and say, okay, that's the drill sergeant. What's the ultimate goal of the drill sergeant? So if my inner critic is saying, you're totally messed up on stage, the ultimate goal of my drill sergeant or my inner critic, I call her Mitzi, is to be successful. Yeah, I named mine. Is to be successful on stage. That's the goal.
What's your inner child? I got to get distracted because it's too cool. Is it Missy or Misty?
Mitzi.
Mitzi.
Yeah.
Why'd you pick that name for your inner child?
Because it just sounds like an inner critic to me. And I apologize if anyone's name is Mitzi.
I've heard, by the way, there's lots of, I'm loving this conversation, but naming your inner child or whatever word you want to use it, that critic is kind of cool. Why by giving it a name does it help?
Because what it does is it distances us instead of just listening to it and oh yeah, that's true. Because how often do we stop and take out a thought and say, how accurate and helpful is that?
Right.
Never. But when we give it a name, it's no longer us.
Yes.
It's a part of us. And so we can distance ourselves. And then instead of getting caught up in that thinking, we can be like, Mitzi's talking.
Right.
Talk to the hand, Mitzi. Yeah.
Now you were in that analogy of the drill sergeant and the cheerleader. I got the drill sergeant. Great analogy. Yeah. What's the analogy for the cheerleader?
Yeah, so I mean, the cheerleader has the same motivation, wanting you to do well. They just do it in a different way. Yay, you're doing great. So it's the same motivation that both people have. It's a very different mechanism of action. And so and you have to be out of the red zone to do this. When we're in the red zone, we can't do this, but we got to be out of the red zone. But if you can, write out, what are you saying to yourself? What's your inner critic saying to you? Or what do you if you can stick that microphone in your brain and then say, okay, that's not very kind. What is the motivation behind it? Yeah. You look at yourself and then if someone looks at themselves in the mirror and they're like, oh, you're fat now, blah, blah, blah. The motivation is you want to be healthy, right? You want to be attractive. Right. That's a nice motivation. Right. Let's work towards that.
Okay, I'm going to go to a classic and I'm going to label myself and everyone else into this idea of male, female. I've noticed, and you tell me with your, with your training. So if I'm perceiving my spouse or partner as being a critic, okay, the drill sergeant, and what I really want is a quote cheerleader, which by the way is a trigger for my wife. Okay. So even that word won't work. Okay. But what do I do? Because let's say, and where I'm getting to is I believe that I want positive reinforcement as a motivation as compared to, hey, sometimes you do need to grab the negative side. But what does a person who's listening to this do? What do we do if we want more of what we're not getting?
Give it.
Nice. See, sometimes the most simplest answer is
it really is. When I'm working with couples, a lot of times they're like, oh, this person needs to change. Great. What are you going to do? Yeah. How are you going to be a better partner right now? And the other thing that's important to realize, and a lot of people don't realize this, so I'm going to share a little more science with you.
Please.
Do you know the 5-to-1 rule?
Not really. Go for it.
Okay. So this was actually discovered by Dr. John Gottman, who studies couples like for decades, and he can predict, he can predict who will get divorced after like a 3-minute conversation. Super cool. Anyway, the 5-to-1 rule, can't do my fingers, is for every 5, the balance, it's not a 1-to-1, right? Yeah. So you look pretty today and you should have done the dishes. Shame on you. We think it's a 1-to-1, or we might think it's 2-to-1, right? You give a compliment, constructive criticism, compliment. It's 5-to-1. 5 positives will balance out 1 quote negative. Now, the important thing to realize is not only this 5-to-1, but that the perceived negative may not be a negative in your mind.
Oh,
but it may be a negative in their mind.
Nice.
So that's where we can get into the whole concept of love languages, which is a delightful thing to talk about. And Beautiful. You're quite familiar, right? There are 5 different love languages. These are languages that we hear love and receive love and give love. And they are words of affirmation. You're doing great. You're so handsome. Acts of service, doing stuff without being asked to do it. Gifts. It doesn't have to be big. It could be, I was at Starbucks and got you your favorite coffee. Let me think, quality time, just be with me. And then physical touch, holding hands. So if someone, and particularly if someone's love language is words of affirmation, going against a love language hurts more when it's your love language. So if someone's words of affirmation, my husband's words of affirmation. So what I perceive as just feedback, it digs into him because that's his love language. I'm acts of service. You can give me feedback. I'm not going to love it all the time, but I'm going to listen to it and it's not going to really hurt me that much. But if you tell me you're going to go to the grocery store and pick up dinner and you don't, that is such a dig to me. But to him or to someone who isn't, acts of service, it's not that big of a deal. So that 5-to-1 is not only the 5-to-1, but you also have to understand that we go back to perception. The 5 is a perception and the 1 is a perception. What is positive is within the eye of the beholder, and so is the negative.
Wow. Okay. Who was that doctor again? What's his name?
John Gottman.
John Gottman.
Gottman.
Yeah. It's interesting. The 5-to-1. I also, tell me if this is accurate, that it depends on also what form of profession you're in. So the example that I was told, not sure it's true, is let's say you're a lawyer. Okay. And you're a lawyer who's dealing with all kinds of negative things throughout your day. I heard that it actually can take more than 5 for that.
Oh yeah.
So,
well, because think of it, we call it the emotional bank account, right? So if you have 20 negatives, then 20 times 5 would be, you need 100 positives.
Okay. Got it.
But all again, it's all in a lot of attorneys are not necessarily words of affirmation because they use their words and they receive words that aren't always so positive.
Yeah. Well, that I love the 5 love languages, by the way. And as you were talking, I knew you knew yours, right? And my wife and I have talked about this too, but I want to put it into a business context. Okay.
Yes.
And so a big concept that I know I've used really well, lived it in the military. Blue Angels are probably the world's best at this. And that is using what we call a debrief in order to get better. Okay. And it's not just a deep, the reason the Blues do it differently, okay, is it's not just feedback. Okay. I understand feedback, right? But it's an environment that where you actually can not only give, but more importantly, get feedback in a way that is safe. It's got to be open and honest. So we say, lay it on the table. We say, check your ego at the door, because that little Misty or whoever I got back there is talking to me. Right. And it's about the we, not the I. So even the separation between me and my teammates. Right. And then the most important part is this, accountability, but that word always scares me, at least. I think it scares others. I think it's more about personal responsibility and ownership, right? So that's what I've deduced from having lived this tens of thousands of times, tens of thousands of debriefs, where they actually become a very positive thing. It doesn't mean they're comfortable all the time. Right. So through your psychological training and your mind, tell me, are those 4 pillars, are they accurate, or let's just dive into that. How do you use this in a business context in a way that that helps somebody?
Well, yeah, and it's so vital, and it's vital to be the role model for it too. So when I'm working with executives, is how are they not just receiving feedback, but asking for feedback, applying it, not just, on the 360, but hey, tell me something what's one thing I could do this week that would help me be a better leader to our team?
Asking that of your team, the leader. Yes. Beautiful.
Because, and then acting on it. Don't ask for feedback and not act on it. That's like when organizations, have the whole, how are you doing? Like I do a lot with mental health and stress. How are you doing with stress? And then they find out people are stressed out. Okay, next, you got to act on it too. There's something that I call unconditional self-worth. So self-worth is how we view ourselves, our worthiness. And instead of looking at high versus low, which I think a lot of times when people are talking about leadership, we talk about, an important component of a good leader is confidence. And yet we all know people who are cocky, right? That's confidence, but not in a positive way. Right. So I talk about conditional versus unconditional self-worth. Conditional self-worth means I believe in myself if and only if certain conditions are met. And those conditions vary from person to person. So it could be, I believe in myself if and only if people agree with me, people compliment me. For some people, I make a certain amount of money, whatever it is, then I feel good about myself. And people with conditional self-worth have a lot of problem accepting, being open to feedback, because their interpretation is, you're putting me down. So when I work with executives, a lot of times we will focus on cultivating unconditional self-worth. Unconditional self-worth means I believe in myself regardless, not in a narcissistic, I'm better than you sort of way. That's actually quite conditional, but I believe in myself because of who I am, my values, going back to our purpose, our meaning, right? Our core characteristics. I believe in myself. I'm good. And I operate from the spirit of continuous improvement. So your feedback when someone has unconditional self-worth is give it to me so I can keep getting better. And so that's a completely different mindset than what the majority of people in our society have, which is conditional self-worth. Oh,
well, the word mindset just kicked in. We started with that, right?
Everything we've been talking about is mindset.
Exactly. That's cool. And that's why it's so important, right? I mean, okay, got it. So I want to go, I mean, I could keep going down this rabbit hole, but I want to not the rabbit hole. I want to talk about, tell me some of, I heard that you were, one of your clients was Shaq. Is that true?
So Shaquille O'Neal says that Dr. Lombardo is his head coach for happiness. Yes. And who has a bigger head or smile than Shaq? So
no kidding. That's a beautiful thing. When did you and Shaq have this relationship as the happiness head coach?
Well, I can't talk about my clients. But yeah, no, he's a great man. And here's what I love about Shaq. Shaq gets it, right? Not only was he an extremely successful basketball player, but since he's retired, what has he done? He has given back. He has, I mean, you talk about passion, purpose, and people, right? He is positive even during challenging times. His purpose is, I mean, he's been gone into law enforcement, and he does all kinds of volunteer work and giving back. And then people, I mean, he surrounds himself with great people. So he's a terrific example of what true happiness can be.
I love that. I had the rare privilege. I was speaking at an event and Shaq was there also. And so we, afterwards we're backstage and we took a picture. I bet you have a picture, but it is hilarious. The difference in size, you know?
Yeah. And even just putting your hand up. I mean, his hand is like 5 of mine. I mean, it's yes.
Well, whatever you did with Shaq is brilliant because I would echo that. He's an amazing human being. You can feel it. And that's beautiful. So talk to me about how do you take people who may not be, you know, as famous as Shaq, you know, you do coaching. You also do, we were talking about some kind of 21 days out of the red zone. Is that true? What is that? Tell me more about what that is.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm a professional speaker, and we've all been to talks before where you're like, that changed my life. And then the next day we go back to regular life, right? Because it was just a one-time experience. So what I like to do after speaking, and it's really important to be giving people what I say, just bite-sized, digestible information. I remember first weekend I was in psychology school, I'm madly taking notes as my professor's speaking, and it hit me. Why do I have to get a PhD to learn this? Like, wouldn't we all benefit from better understanding our minds and how to help them work for instead of against us? And so that really became my mission, is to give people this information without having to go back to school. And how does it apply in your life? So what I love to do is, after giving a keynote or after doing some coaching, is to do some follow-up. And so I have this 21-day program based on the book, Get Out of the Red Zone. It's 3 minutes. Everyone's, I have no time. You could do it while you're brushing your teeth, right? While you're walking the dog, while you're making your coffee. It's a 3-minute video each day, and it's one topic. It's one thing to focus on that day, because we know we want to rewire our brains. It's all about rewiring our brains. I used to be a worrywart. Give me something to worry about and I will worry. And I remember I was in psychology school. I was talking to a friend of mine who was also, it's called generalized anxiety disorder, but I'll call it being a worrywart. And I remember talking to one of my classmates, and she was a worrier too. And I was talking to her, I was like, you know, you don't have to worry. You can change how you think. You can and I don't know if you've ever given advice to someone and realized it's actually for you. So I was like, oh, this is, I'm talking to myself here. So I rewired my brain literally. So I'm not a warrior anymore. Warrior perhaps, not worrier anymore. When I was in undergrad, I used to say that exercise was, quote, against my religion. I did not like exercise at all. I went to college and I was so fearful of the freshman 15. Now, I could have just eaten well and not drinking any beer, but that was not my choice. I decided I was going to exercise. I decided something else. I decided I was going to like exercise.
Nice. Big difference.
Fast forward, I taught group fitness for almost 20 years. That's how much I love exercise. And it wasn't fake. I literally rewired my brain. And this was way before I knew how to rewire brains. But the key is really to rewire our brains so that it works for instead of against us. And anyone can do this. Again, it's just the get rid of the stuff that doesn't work, learn the stuff that does, and practice. That's all it is.
I can't wait. I'm going to sign up for your 21 days because it is now in that 3 minutes. And you were saying you could do it while you're brushing your teeth, right? So are you giving what you're giving them a thought, and then do you give them an action? Tell me what.
Yeah, there's an action step for each one.
So for example,
it may be, start to become aware of where you are. That's the stress scale. We talked before about that 0 to 10. A lot of times we don't even know where we are until we're yelling at someone. So starting to become aware of what are your signs. I call them red flags. It's the emotions that you don't want. Sometimes it's physical sensations, right? Stress shows up in our body. I remember walking by the mirror when I was working on my dissertation, and this is how I looked, and I'll explain what it looks like. My ears and my shoulders were one, right? Because all of my red zoneness goes into my neck. So how does your body feel? And then the third red flag are behaviors, engaging in behaviors you don't want to do. Maybe being more snippy with loved ones, or procrastination. That is a red flag. A lot of times we procrastinate when we're in the red zone. So just starting to become aware of where are you on this scale, because you want to take the steps. When you get into that yellow zone we talked about, you want to wait till you're the red zone. When you get into the yellow zone, you want to take steps to get down into that green zone again.
And why 21 days?
Well, I mean, the research shows it's between 21 and 31 days where we actually have neuronal changes in our brain.
21 to 31 days. You know, I've heard so many different numbers. I guess one of the things that a neuroscientist told me is he goes, because I asked him the same question, how long does it take? And he said, John, you're asking the wrong question. I was like, oh, that's cool. And he said, what you really want to ask is, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to change? Because that will determine. So tell me about that from your research.
I mean, our brain can change from one event. That's what PTSD is, right? One event, it's traumatic enough, boom. What in terms of rewiring the brain, there are a couple of basics. One is repetition, right? Okay. If I said ABC to you, you might start singing the alphabet song, right? And why is that? Because you heard it over and over and over again as a kid. You're probably saying it over and over as good, right? You didn't come out of your mama's womb singing it, but you heard it enough that it's wired in your brain. So one is repetition. Another is emotion. Going back to PTSD, one of the reasons why people can have one traumatic event and it rewires their brain is because there's such intense emotion. We can also use that for good.
Yeah.
So bringing out the emotion, for example, a gratitude practice.
Yeah.
Sure, people have heard of a gratitude practice. We know from brain scans that when people experience gratitude and they really feel gratitude, the stress centers in their brain reduce activity. Very powerful. So when people talk about
stress centers do what? They reduce
activity.
Yeah,
they're not
so like
active.
On the MRIs, you're seeing a decrease in those areas. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Or even like, I think on the blood, right? They can test what are those indicators, those markers of stress go down too?
Cortisol. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. Got
Adrenaline.
it. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So gratitude. Okay.
I mean, IgGs, our immune system changes too. That's a whole nother. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole field of research called psychoneuroimmunology, which looks at how stress impacts our immune system and our nervous system. Fascinating stuff. I mean, truly incredible stuff. There's a researcher named James Pennebaker who researched something called written emotional disclosure, which basically means journaling. And what he would do is he would ask randomly assigned groups, one, write about your deepest, darkest secrets, right? Like the trauma, the stuff that really is so upsetting to you. And the other group wrote about, I don't know what they did the day before. They did this for 3 days for, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes. That's all they did. And then they followed these people for 3 months, 6 months, and a year. And what we found is that the people who write about their deepest, darkest trauma, once they get it out, less depressive symptoms, less anxiety, less trips to the doctor, and stronger immune systems.
Wow. In 3 days? It only took 3 days of writing?
Yeah. So a lot of times when people are like, what can I do?
What was that doctor's name again? I want to look that up.
Yeah, James Pennebaker, Pennebaker.
Okay.
I had the pleasure of meeting him. He's a delightful man.
Okay.
So I don't remember where we're going with this, but
no, you had emotion. So we're talking about the rewire repetition.
Yeah, repetition and emotion.
And what is there?
And then there's other stuff. I work a lot on directly on the subconscious with NLP kind of techniques, but in terms of what people can do themselves is repetition and emotion. Oh, so going back to a gratitude journal, a lot of times people will say, gratitude journal is great. You want to identify not only what you're grateful for, but you also want to bask in it. Yes. I would say it's like looking out, like it's sunny here right now. So I'm looking out at the sunshine and that's nice. But if I sat in the sun, that's what you want to bask in gratitude. And it doesn't have to be anything huge. It doesn't have to be, I won, this huge, it could be something as simple as being able to take a deep breath yourself, right? Or that it's a nice day, or I have a four-legged son and just, I had to lock the door because he can open doors and he wouldn't be part of this podcast right now. But even just kind of being in that love and gratitude, it is so powerful.
Hey, how do you, what dog do you have? What's your four-legged son?
Oh, he's a mini golden doodle mini golden doodles are supposed to be like 30 pounds. He's 12, maybe. Like only like after his bath, he's 12 pounds. So he's this little mutt looking dog and just brings a lot of joy to us.
So he's a mini golden doodle.
Exactly, yes.
We just rescued two Rhodesian Ridgebacks. my wife and I, and the little one is 72 pounds and she's amazing. And then we're part of the rescue, Ridgeback Rescue. And so we were just fostering this male who's 107 pounds. And so we were just, temporarily, and, we're foster fail, couldn't give him up. He was so adorable. And actually it's because the other dog, really loved them and they play so well together. But now we almost have 200 pounds of dogs, but just like you said,
200 pounds in your household.
But it changes your life when you look at the love, right? And I love what you said about basking in something as compared. I'm even thinking about the concept of visualization, or meditation, right? Difference between just thinking about it and basking in it. We could talk forever. I want to start to wrap this up with a couple of action steps. So what is a way, what's your morning routine is one question I'd like to know. And then we'll go from there. And what other practices can we do in order to help us achieve that happiness we talked about?
Yeah. So I am an annoyingly happy person in the morning. Like I wake up before my alarm and I'm a morning person, but please know by like 9 p.m. I'm like, don't talk to me. Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
I'm the same.
So, there's research. I have to throw in some research when asked a question that watching the news for 3 minutes in the morning increases your chance of having a bad day, of being in the red zone by 27%.
Whoa.
So what I don't do is I don't get on the news. In fact, I don't watch the news unless I am on it. But I think, a morning routine is so important. And when we go from asleep to awake and awake to asleep, our brain waves are in a very hypnotic, very suggestible state. That is the time to be feeling with positivity, with love, with positive intention. So for me, I usually, when I first wake up, I'm sure hygienically this isn't great. My dog is on my bed, so I spend a little time with Bailey and I meditate. That's how I start my day. And part of my meditation is gratitude. So I'm really priming my brain for positivity. And
wow.
I think it's important not only to have a morning routine, but it's important to figure out for each person, what do you need? Because each person has different needs to be their best self. So me, I need the three things that are best for me are when I meditate, I exercise, and I get my sleep. And when I have those three things in my life, I can handle most of what goes on in my life. We were talking before this, my husband is very ill. He was in the hospital for almost 100 days. And it was 2 hours there, 2 hours back. I had younger kids, blah, blah, blah. Everything's going on. He's coding, he's crashing, he's intubated 7 times. And even through all that, I still meditated every day. I exercised. Was it a huge long workout? Nope. But I got my exercise and I got my sleep. And when I had those three things, for me, I could stay out of the red zone more often. So individually, like what does each person need to be their best selves? And I know people are busy, right? I get that, but figuring it out, I often say, when people say, I don't have time to do that, I'll say, well, when was the last time you said, oh my gosh, I have not brushed my teeth in 6 months? Like, no one says that because no one thinks, oh, I wish I had time to brush my teeth. It's just a habit. Once you start doing something over and over again, it becomes a habit. Exercise, I said, I always said I didn't, it's against my religion. Now it's a part of my day. It doesn't matter what's going on. It is a part of my day. Even if it's just a 10-minute walk, it's a part of my day.
Do you have, I love that, the three things, and that builds resiliency, right? You also mentioned that we should have routines, not just waking up. I mean, going to bed, I think, is another precious time, right? To put your mind in a grateful state. I like to do the gratitude practice at night too. But you have any techniques for the evening? What do you do?
So I tend to take a bath or a warm shower, dim the lights, and then I read a trashy novel. Nothing intellectual, the romance novels, whatever it is, maybe a little murder mystery, although sometimes I'll stay up late at night reading that. But yeah, because what happens is, remember Pavlov's dog, right? Ring the bell, gave the food, salivated without the food, just from the bell, because the body got used to that. Same thing, so many people have trouble falling asleep. You want to create a routine that signals to your body, it's time to go to bed. So dimming the lights, listening to music. Sometimes I'll do a meditation before going to sleep or in falling asleep. What's going to help calm your mind and your body and put you in a really good place. And putting good things in your mind, because guess what happens when you're sleeping? Your subconscious is still processing stuff. Yeah. So if you're watching the news right before bed, or if you're having an argument right before bed, or if you're stressing out about the next day right before bed, it's not going to help your sleep.
Yep, 100%. So when somebody, what's the stats? That one you quoted was again awesome. The science. What did you just say about
3 minutes of news?
Yeah, it's 27%.
Increases your chance of having a bad day by 27%.
20. Okay. How about the idea of, do we have any stats on, like when you check your phone, you said watching 3 minutes of news, but I'm thinking about the light, from your phone or even all that kind of stuff. I'm asking you from a selfish reason because my wife has a hard time falling asleep. And so I'm trying to help her.
Oh yeah. I mean, now they have on your phone, you can actually change the light. So it's not but And it's also what is your reaction? So for me, I can look at my calendar the next day before going to bed and I'm happy as heck, right? I'm going to have a podcast. I'm going to have a couple of clients. Maybe I'm going to be speaking. I'm going to be traveling. I love it all. But for some people, looking at their calendar causes them stress. So going back to perception, figuring out for you what is going to be what's going to be positive.
And I love what you said about the shower or the warm bath. She does that all the time. And I think that's a great idea. Because I could fall asleep in a heartbeat. I don't have that problem. Cool.
Have you always been able to do that, or did you train yourself to do that? Because I know a lot of people in the military, they train themselves to do that.
Yeah, I think my environment trained me. It wasn't like I said, hey, I want to train myself to fall asleep on aircraft carriers with the noise going like crazy. No, you either do that or you're miserable, right? So
you're just exhausted. Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's why also we could go down this, the environment versus yourself, right? So I think a lot of times the environment allowed me to make some better habits. And I'm sure it probably created some bad habits too, right? The environment. So how do we create our good habits? You've got so many good stories. By the way, your book, I'm going to pick that up. Hold that up again. What's the name of it?
I'm going to send you the audio.
Oh, the audio. That's right. It's better for me. Get out of the red zone. And what's the subtitle?
Transform your stress to optimize true success.
It's
not about getting rid of stress. It's about transforming it. Because here's the thing, stress isn't a bad thing. Distress is the negative component of stress, but eustress, spelled EU stress, is the positive component of stress. That's what motivates us, right? That's where if for my mission is to help bring out the best in other people, that gets me excited. There's a lot of work I got to do or I get to do in order to do that. So that's that kind of eustress, that excitement.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome. Are there certain takeaways? I'm going to wrap up with 2 questions. So I'm just kind of setting it up. We're going to end with the glad to be here question, but I want to start with, are there certain mantras? Are there certain sayings, as you did your research, but more importantly, that you live your life by? What do you live your life by that's meaningful to you?
So I heard a saying once, it all works out in the end. If it hasn't worked out, it's not the end.
Oh, that's nice.
And I think that's nice. Yeah. We and I were talking about my husband before, so I'll just bring him up. Please. So my husband is, he has ALS. And if anyone out there has a loved one with ALS, my heart goes out to you. It's just, I don't know what disease is a good one, but it's a truly horrific disease. Completely paralyzed, been on a ventilator for over 5 years, nonverbal. So I would say another practice that I have is just asking the question, and we all can do this regardless of what's going on, asking the question of what is going well right now. Because so often what happens is we focus on what's going wrong. And I mean, I could tell you, I could have snot coming out of my nose, crying, telling you about what we've been going through these past, he was diagnosed 7 years ago. But I could also tell you about the beautiful, just everyday experiences we have. His hands are contracted, so they are literally stuck. I don't know how to describe this, but his fingers are curled and he can't open his fingers. So in order to hold hands, and I am acts of service and physical touch. So in order to hold hands with my husband, I put my finger within his contracted hand, and we sit and hold hands. He can communicate with his eyes. He has something called an eye gaze board, which is basically an iPad, but instead of your finger, you use your eyes. And so he can not speak, but he can communicate that way. So thankfully we can still have conversations, but a lot of our time is just kind of being together, watching a show, just being present together. And I think that question, we're talking about being in the red zone. When we're in the red zone, we only focus on what's wrong. When you ask the question, what is right? What's going well? It may be, what am I grateful for? It really helps us to see, even during challenging and incredibly challenging times, there's good stuff that's happening.
Wow. Well, first off, thank you for sharing that with not just me, but everybody. And when I hear that, it really validates that what you're saying is true. It works, right? Because you obviously, if there's anybody that is tested and has been for a long time, that's it, right?
And I have 2 teenagers, so I'm just no, I'm just kidding. I have great kids.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, yeah. See, what's going well, right? That's what I heard you say.
What's going well? Yeah.
What's going well?
It does have, the whole gratitude thing. I mean, ever since my husband's been on a ventilator, one of the things I'm grateful for is
breathe.
I did that all by myself. Sometimes I live in Chicago and it gets cold here. And sometimes Bailey, when I'm taking him outside at night, he takes forever to do his business. And I'm like, and then I think to myself, my husband would do anything to be able to walk outside and be in this cold and walk the dog. And it's not, I stress this with my clients and with my children. It's not guilt, but gratitude. So I could go into that, I should be happier. Or I could just say, you know what, I am, and really experience that gratitude of, I get to do this.
Wow. Wow. Dr. E, Elizabeth, it's been a precious time together. I know people in the show notes will have a way to contact you, but if they want, like I do, more of your information, what's the best way?
ElizabethLombardo.com.
ElizabethLombardo.com. Awesome. I can't wait. Definitely going to listen to your book because I like the audio version. And thank you for all the beautiful insights, but not just, the science behind it, the life skills that you've brought to it. Right. And I think it's important to have both. And that's probably why you're such an amazing speaker and coach to people is you've lived it. And I think that's when you can actually teach it and to live it. So I'm super grateful. That's my glad to be here, share out. You've made not only the day today for me, but going into the Labor Day weekend, what a blessing. I'll let you close out our podcast with what does glad to be here mean to you, and why are you glad to be here right now?
Glad to be here means that we are focusing on the positive. And as we said before, in life, there is good and not so good. And it really, what we focus on is what gets stronger. And so if we can, and I try to practice this, and I, just shared some of my story, but, when we focus on what's going well, why we're glad to be here, that is going to enhance our energy. It's going to impact us. And as we said, I'm bringing this full circle, by the way, it's going to impact all the people around us too. So we can literally change the world starting within. And that to me is very exciting.
Whoa. That's the best one I've heard. I asked that with everybody, but wow, did you bring that home? All right, Dr. E, thank you so much. You're a living example of glad to be here, and keep doing what you're doing. You're making a big difference in people. Thanks for being.
Well, you too. Keep doing what you're doing. It's an honor to be on your show, and it's really great that you're doing this. So thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Glad to be here.